I have my piece of mat board here that we've cut to the size of the perimeter, and now I'm actually ready to cut the window out. So the tools that you're going to need for this step, we've already talked about some, but just as a review, you'll need the mat maker itself, which is a two-part set, this arm and the base underneath it. You need this long, skinny scrap of mat board because, again, there are these grooves here that you don't want to use to cut in. So this is going to remain there for me to use. You'll also need the blade itself, which you should check and make sure is whole, and you should be cautious when you're using. And you're probably going to need some kind of a cutting device, either an X-Acto or a utility knife, and you still need your pencil. But you'll notice that I'm not going to touch the rulers at all during this time. So this arm that's here has numbers on it, and the numbers represent the size of the mat that you're about to cut, the width of the border. And so we've done all of our measurements for 2 and 2.5. The pegs that the arm rests on here, they actually relate to how much of an overlap between your measurements and this window or this hole that you're about to cut. I like to give myself a little bit of an overlap so that if I did do a measurement poorly, it kind of works out in my favor. So that's why I like to work on the third peg from the bottom. It just gives me that kind of extra security. So I'm going to place it on 2 to start with. Make sure my scrap of mat board is here, and I'm also going to make sure that I'm doing all of my pencil marks on the back. And you should be able to see your own pencil lines, but if not, maybe you have something like these little numbers that are on here as a reminder. That's the back side. So I'm going to slide it under the bar and let the bar fall back down on the mat. I'm going to grab my pencil and I'm going to trace some nice guidelines for myself. And again, you'll notice I'm not measuring these. I'm letting the mat maker do the work for me. And so I'm doing them on the top and both sides. Then I'm going to do my bottom. Again, bottom is a little bit thicker just to give it that visual weight. So I'm sliding it over to the 2.5 nudge here between the 2 and the 3. And I'm going to trace that, and then I'm ready to start cutting. So it's all done, ready to cut. So we've lined up the blade right against the bar. I'm ready to cut, and we wanted you to see a couple things. First of all is that you want to start the blade a tiny bit before your pencil line so that you have time for the action of pushing down in. We also wanted you to see that the blade is not actually going to touch those pencil lines. So just to move things for a second, you can see that there's the pencil line. It goes under, and the blade isn't going to get any closer than that. And that's because we're cutting at a 45-degree angle for that nice bevel cut. So you probably want to stand up for this step if you aren't standing already. If you haven't set everything up so that it's on your left hand, you want to do that because the blade is sharp only on one portion. And so you can't just go any direction you want to. You need to press up, and it needs to be on your left-hand side. So again, I'm going to line up the blade just a hair before the pencil marks that I've made, and I'm going to place my left hand here on the bar to kind of secure my mat board. And I'm going to lean in with some pressure and go all the way up to my other pencil line. It's really important that you stop at that pencil line. If you didn't, you would just have cut like a little strip off your artwork, and then you need to start over again. You want to pull it out and kind of check to make sure that you actually cut the mat. This is the first time you can turn it over and see the beveled edge if you want to. And then you're going to move on to all your other cuts. Remember, that was the bottom, so that's at 2.5. Now I'm going to slide it back over to 2, and I'm going to make my 3 other cuts, making sure that I overlap my cuts and that I stop at the pencil line as I go up. And again, checking to make sure that the blade has gone through the whole piece of mat board. While you're doing each cut. If for some reason it hasn't, you can go back and recut that same spot again. It's helpful to start and end in the exact same spot, and it shouldn't really hurt anything for you to do that. once you have finished cutting all the sides, you want to pull it out and see what's going on with your corners. What you don't want to do is you don't want to push it out. You can see that I've got one corner that fell out really nicely on there. The other corners are just hanging in by a thread. What could happen if I punch it from the other side is it could tear along this side. And if you remember, this is going to be the front of my mat, so I want to not push it straight through. Instead, I want to get either an X-Acto knife or a utility knife to work with. And you want to take that and slide it along in the mat, in the beveled edge that you've cut, and just kind of give it a little sawing action right up in the corner so that it comes out a little bit more naturally than if you pushed it through. Okay. I have my window and I have the piece that I cut out of it, and I'm ready to lay it on my artwork and tape it in.